Chapter 41. Towards Hope. For many of us, the road is a difficult one, but the path is always there for us to follow, no matter how many times we may fall.
Madness. I stood there, the streamlet flowing behind absolutely everything washing over my hooves, and stared at Calamity, my jaw unhinged. There was simply no other word. Calamity's plan was insane. Hell, it wasn't even a plan. Plans have plan stuff. Calamity had a bunch of ideas and vague hopes tied together by multiple points of, and then something happens. We didn't have who or what we needed to even try it. I doubted we could get them. Well? He asked, earnestly seeking my approval. I'm beginning to agree with Velvet Remedy, I told him, recalling her reaction to his actions in the Zebratown Police Headquarters. So you're willing to give it a try? God damn it. Calamity was staring at me with the eyes of a fool, hoping for my acceptance, my support of this madness. This plan, it was something he needed to try. Needed like a starving pony needs food. I manufactured a smile. I don't have a better plan, I admitted. Sure, why not? We were all going to die. Watcher's Spritebot bobbed in the rain beside us, silently listening. Finally, the mechanical voice that disguised Spike plaintively asked, Is there anything I can do, guys? I'm really sorry. I thumped my rain-soaked forehead with an even wetter hoof. Think. Think, you silly mare. Yes, I asserted, looking sidelong at the Spritebot. Yes, there is. What do you need? Spike asked. I waved a hoof. Just wait there for a moment. First, I need to talk to God. What I don't understand, I told Calamity as we started to walk back towards the front of absolutely everything, is why the Wonderbolts haven't already hit us. The Wonderbolts are fast, right? Calamity looked askance. Fast. You could say that, yes. Lightning flashed across the sky. Shouldn't they have gotten to Ironshot already? I reckoned, talking above the rumbling thunder. It shouldn't take long to get my tag. Especially not if Lens Flare was as skilled as he sounded. And New Appaloosa was an awfully short flight from Ironshot firearms. They're all probably caught up in the committee. Calamity snarked wryly. I halted, my hooves growing muddy, and gave Calamity a confused look. Surely he wasn't saying they had to, what, file a hunting plan? Were all the ponies in the sky crazy? Calamity turned the corner, almost knocking over Railright. I heard the two stallions mumble apologies as I caught up. Railright was standing under the eave of Ditzy-Doo's store, apparently waiting for some pony. At the sight of me, he nodded, then cast a furtive glance towards the lights along the city wall. Last I had seen Railright, he was escorting away several ponies who had dared come below the Enclave's cloud cover. Where are the new Pegasi? I asked the sheriff/mayor, wondering just how much I'd slept through. Railright glanced at Calamity before answering. I put them to work assisting the community. In return, they have a place in the common house so they can better situate themselves. I looked to Calamity questioningly. My Pegasus friend frowned, his tone sour as he informed me. Enclave broadcast an offer to aid the misplaced citizens. Tracker accepted the offer at face value and flew off, promising to contact Frost by a pit-buck soon as he was skyside. That was over 6 hours ago. Calamity here was worming some sense into the two mares when the broadcast came on. Railright added. That mare with the pit-buck is some kind of ex-military, I think. Something about that broadcast spooked her proper. I found myself feeling distinctly worried for Tracker. And what brings you to Ditsy's porch, Sheriff? Calamity asked, trying to sound casual. Railright shook his head at the Pegasus's suspicion. I tried to remember that Railright and Calamity had known each other for years. Their relationship had always been cordial, if not downright friendly, before the balefire bombs and rogue Pegasi got thrown into the mix. Just getting a weather report from the Grimfeathers, Calamity told him. Thunderstorm spreads from the shores of Buckland all the way to the edge of Hope. Storms cleansing the air of smoke from the Everfree, and there's nasty rain out over Splendid Valley. 'Cause that place needs to be more toxic, Calamity nickered. Just our luck that the broken weather over Everfree is keeping the storm out, Railright added. It's almost like that place wants to be on fire. Hope? I asked Calamity. Yep, Calamity agreed. Then, seeing my confusion, "You been there before, little Pip. The rubble that used to be Hope is only about a few hours down the track. It's that old town with the weapons factory, Railwright clarified. Iron-shod firearms. I remembered walking through the playground of Hope. I'd seen my first Ministry morale poster there. I just hadn't known the town's name. And you got the array a few miles back from it, towards the Everfree Forest. The what now? I asked, confused. Array? Hope Solar Array, Calamity told me, sounding a little bored. Bunch of dishes pointed up at the clouds. Best I can gather, the ponies of the old world tried all sorts of crazy ways to get power when the coal supply got strangled. Now, that I didn't see. Granted, the only time I've been up high enough to have glimpsed it out of a factory window, I was a bit busy outrunning collapsing catwalks. I paused to process this. Technology for turning sunlight into energy. Made sense considering Twilight Sparkle's ministry had been working on weaponizing sunlight. And this Celestia 1, or Celestia Prime, or whatever they're calling it, can't even be cast unless it's sunny. I can't tell the princess that the only defense we have against those missiles can be defeated by a cloudy day. What if the zebras decide to attack us during the night? Clearly, there were still bugs to be worked out. But even the hope of power for the wasteland was just one more reason Equestria deserved to see the sun. Old generators and spark batteries weren't going to last forever. Calamity was reaching his hoof towards the door when it swung open. Regina Grimfeathers framed in the doorway. My friend backed up as the griffin pushed her way out, nodding to all of us. The gun-toting adolescent griffin leaned against the wall where Ditsy's sign had been, and pulled out a pack of cigarettes. Absolutely everything's porch was getting crowded. Any of you see where that little unicorn ran off to? Reggie asked casually as she lit up a cigarette. Since I was standing right there, I assumed that the little unicorn she was talking about was Silverbell. Calamity had come to the same conclusion. Silverbell's missing. She'd been inside just a minute ago. Railwright bit his lower lip. I think I saw her head up to the toilets. Oh. Let's not form a search party then. I was mentally glaring daggers at Watcher as I added. Give her some privacy. Coming swiftly on the hooves of that thought, the realization that New Appaloosa had public bathrooms struck me across the forehead like a nail board. Ow. Damn it, of course they did. What had I been thinking? Now what you blushing about, little Pip? Oh, thanks, Calamity. Couldn't let that one go unasked, could you? Nope. You were saying something about committees? Calamity mercifully took the hint, jumping back onto the former topic like he had never left it. Remember I told you that the Enclave keeps Pegasi can do the sonic rainboom real close? Well, now you can see why. With all the cloud tech the Enclave relies on, not to mention the cloud curtain, they view the sonic rainboom as a weapon of mass destruction. I looked towards where one of the raptors had come down on the town. Work lights had been set up, illuminating it through the pouring rain. The silhouettes of ponies moved about it in the downpour, scavenging. You gotta realize, little Pip, that when the Pegasi closed the sky, we'd lost just one city. Only one. Granted, Cloud's Day was the biggest, but that still left several more that survived pretty much untouched by the war. All that pre-war technology, magic, they've been repurposing and recycling all that stuff for centuries. Lightning split the sky. Thunder pounded down on us like it was trying to drive us into the mud. But they can't make any more, Calamity shouted. Pegasi can't make magic items like unicorns or zebras, and there ain't nothing up there to build except what was left from the past. And clouds. Clouds make for good Pegasi homes, but they ain't so useful for making armor and bullets. I remembered how my hoof passed right through the Enclave terminal interface. The few mountains that rise above the clouds have either been stripped of their resources, or are homes for nasty things that the Enclave would rather not piss off. Like Spike. The Enclave invaded the Griffin skies a few generations ago, just to get at their mountains. Calamity nodded to Reggie, who took a long drag on her cigarette and spat a curse at the sky. When the war ended, Calamity added, Pegasi had about 50 raptors and only 4 thunderheads, and no ability to make more. Including the 4 raptors you took out with that balefire bomb, and the one down near Stalliongrad, the Enclave has lost a dozen of their warships in under a week. That's more than they've lost in 200 years. And 4 of them were taken out by Ditzy-Doo's toxic rainboom. Calamity gave me a meaningful stare. At this point, the Enclave must be about pissing themselves. I wished he hadn't used that particular phrase. Good, I said firmly, then asked, What does that have to do with the Wonderbolts, though? Calamity rolled his eyes. Ain't it obvious, little Pip? I told you, the Enclave keeps all Pegasi who can do the sonic rainboom real close. Oh, now I got it. The Wonderbolts. Any Pegasus who proved capable of performing a sonic rainboom was drafted into the Enclave's celebrity hit squad. That meant that the ponies hunting us were all that good. I liked Calamity's plan even less now. And when the Enclave saw what Ditsy did, I guessed, putting the pieces together, they pulled the Wonderbolts into... I searched for an appropriate phrase. Emergency tactical meetings, calling on their expertise to try to get a handle on this new threat. Calamity nodded. Yeah, something like that. They have no idea how many ghoul Pegasi live down here. Causing me to think back to the flock of zombie Pegasi we'd run into from the Cloudsdale outskirts. And if Ditsy could do it, theoretically just about any sufficiently radiated ghoul Pegasi should be able to pull off a toxic rainboom. Yes, the Enclave really must be pissing themselves. The upshot is, I reckon we got a few days before the Wonderbolts are hot on our tails. God was talking to Ditsy when I entered the store. Cage and the bodyguard were next to them, huddled around a spool table, playing a game involving rectangles of hardened paper. My curiosity urged me to divert long enough to peek in on the game. Each griffin held a number of colorfully marked papers in their talons, and there were 6 more piles of papers face up on the table, as well as 2 face down that they seemed to be drawing new papers from as they played. I would have watched longer, trying to understand the rules, but I didn't want to leave Watcher waiting. And besides, the game was clearly not for ponies. A unicorn might be able to hold those little papers fanned like that, but why learn a game you couldn't play with your Pegasi and Earth Pony friends? Trotting up to God, who was nodding at something Ditsy had written on her chalkboard, I interrupted as politely as I could. Ditsy stepped back, nodding with a smile. God, there's something I need from you. I wanted to ask this as a favor, but the little pony in my head reminded me that favors weren't how God worked. God respected the contract. The gruff female griffin looked down on me with her one good eye, her expression unreadable. Sorry, kid, but you ain't my type. She thought I was... But then, what else would she think after her daughter caught me looking at her? It's nothing like that, I stopped, recovering. Part of me wanted to bury myself and hide until I drowned in my own embarrassment. But this was too important. And besides, I wasn't interested in her like that. I mean, sure, but I had homage, and it wasn't very likely that I was going to be around much longer. The last damn thing I was going to do in my remaining days here was cheat on homage. The little mare in my head whimpered. I'm not? Not helping. Gaudina raised an eyebrow. Well, of course not, I mentally hissed at my little pony. She's a griffin. With children. Which highly suggested she was interested in other griffins. Male ones. And why was I even having this discussion with myself? Trying to get this back on track, I asserted. You have a contract to protect this town, right? Yeah? The griffin said slowly, her face shifting into a stern expression of negotiation. But you didn't protect it. Ditsy here did. Yes? She said again, even more slowly. And there's a really good chance that the Enclave will come after her. And they'll probably wipe out the town to get to her if she's here. I could see Ditsy eyes widen. God hadn't been in Friendship City, but Ditsy had seen the horrible lengths the Enclave would go to. God was looking at Ditsy and frowning. She's hired Gilgamesh as her personal bodyguard, but I take it you think I need to do more. I detailed what I wanted God to do. About halfway through my explanation, her good eye widened, and she turned to me in shock. Are you insane? Apparently, all the ponies in this town were crazy, including me. I was with you until the Dragon Cave. But I think asking me and my griffins to fly Ditsy here above the clouds and into the home of a dragon is stretching the contract I have with this town a mite bit too far. The dragon won't be hostile. Not to you. I promise. Oh, you do you? She fixed me with an appraising look. Your relationship with dragons seems to have changed since last I saw. Yeah, well, this dragon doesn't eat ponies, I asserted. Or griffins. At least I was pretty sure Spike didn't eat griffins. What did Spike eat, anyway? Just gems? Well, If you want me to liberally interpret the contract to include dragon visiting, God suggested, then maybe you can see your way to liberally interpreting what we're getting paid. I was going to be broke after this, but it was worth it to keep Ditzy-Doo safe, and Silverbell. Okay, but you'll have to take both of them, Ditzy and her daughter, as soon as... Where's Silverbell, anyway? Shouldn't she be back by now? I looked to Ditzy-Doo. Some pony should be watching that filly. The thought struck me swiftly. Where's Zenith? Worry became panic when Stiletto burst in, looking nastily smug. Hey, Derpy, that ditzy filly of yours is up at Railroad Station. Needs you something bad. The bodyguard, Gilgamesh, was fast. Ditzy-Doo was faster. She'd flown out the door, leaving paper rectangles swirling through the air from her backwash, even before my mind could process what the Shattered Hoof Raider had said. Shooting Stiletto a nasty look, and a "why aren't you helping then?" I raced into the night storm after her. Gilgamesh was in front of me, Calamity behind. I heard Gaudina ordering Cage to watch the store just before the door banged closed behind me. Yep, this was what wet felt like. I thought I was wet a few minutes ago. Wow, was I wrong. The rain was heavier now, falling in sheets that drenched me to the bone before I'd gotten to the street. But I didn't care. All I cared about was Silverbell. The pony in my head was biting her hooves, insisting that I should have gotten the two of them to safety sooner. Why did I have to fall asleep? My hoof splashed into the river beneath me. Calamity and Gilgamesh were faster, reaching the station house that had been claimed by New Appaloosa's mayor/sheriff. Ditzy-Doo was already at the front door. The lights were out. Not a good sign. I floated out little Macintosh, kicking on my eyes forward sparkle. I tried to call out to Ditzy-Doo to urge caution, but I was too late. The ghoul Pegasus spun in the air and bucked the door open, revealing blackness inside. My EFS compass lit up with dozens of lights, just as Ditzy-Doo pivoted back and flew into the dark maw of the doorway. It was a trap. I levitated little Macintosh in front of me, galloping as fast as I could to catch up. Wait. None of the lights on my EFS compass were a hostile red. A flash of light poured out of Railroad Station, as dozens of colorful New Appalachians shouted in unison, "Surprise!" I nearly shot a balloon. A cake floated into view, surrounded by a caramel-colored field of magic, followed by a familiar yellow unicorn pony with an orange and beige striped mane. The cake was baked in the shape of a giant muffin, echoing the many muffins on the nearby table beneath a glittering banner. Thank you, Ditzy-Doo. Ditzy stood in the middle of the room, wide-eyed and stunned.
Do you like it?
Silverbell asked anxiously.
It's a party.
The filly seemed nervous.
For you,
she added. I could tell from her wide, glistening eyes, and by the many decorations, that the little lavender filly had done most of the work on the surprise thank you party. Probably planned it. There was still a touch of Pinky Bell in her, and at some level this must be triggering odd emotions in the young girl. Ditzy-Doo made those fears evaporate as she flew to Silverbell, scooping the filly up against her breast and lavishing her with kisses until the girl was crying with happiness. Soon, every pony was enjoying the party. Hey, Crane, I said, turning to the yellow unicorn. Thought I saw your telekinesis yesterday morning. Crane grinned. Thanks for the catch. Now thank you, he insisted. Couldn't have done it without your help. And that little filly's, he added, looking over at Silverbell, who was trying to regain her ability to stand after a dizzying round of hugging. That's the first magic that little gal's managed since getting her horn back. I honestly think seeing Mommy there do the Radboom was what did it. Somehow, be smart, I was certain he was right. We spent the next hour catching up, which mostly involved me regaling him with all the telekinetic tricks I'd managed in the past 2 months. To my delight, Crane was duly impressed with my creativity. But it wasn't until I told him about telekinetically flying that I managed to surprise him with my telekinetic prowess. Damn, girl, he said, wide-eyed. That took me years of work to pull off. I felt a little crestfallen that I hadn't managed something unique. But Crane wasn't considered the best telekinetic in the equestrian wasteland for nothing. And at least my learning curve had been faster. How far can you get? I can manage 1 lap in New Appaloosa before my juice runs out. I don't really know, I admitted. I'd made it from the ground to Calamity Shack, but I'd never tried testing how far I could push it. I'm afraid that I'll burn out again if I push too hard, trying to find out. You been burning out, huh? He asked. I nodded. Well, you've been pushing yourself, I'm not surprised. We both jumped as something in the room exploded in confetti. Good news is there's a remedy for that, Crane told me as he floated all the bits of confetti off of the two of us, depositing them in the waste bin. A cure for burnout. He had my full attention. Sadly, the wasteland might not have it much longer. Requires a few plants that only grow in the Everfree forest. Reckon they're all burnt up by now. Well, crap. Might be willing to part with one of my bottles of it, though, Crane said slyly. For a favor. Right. Should have seen that one coming. Plus, Crane's last favor involved a stable full of chimeras.
I'm a little busy being hunted right now, I admitted. If I live through this, I'll keep your offer in mind.
Maybe the first time ever that I had turned down a distracting quest. But I really couldn't spare the time. Unless...
This favor. Is any pony in danger?
Nope, Crane said. I felt a wash of relief. At least not that I know of. Well, that was something at least. There's a farm out on the edge of the Everfree forest, near the Hope Solar Array. Close enough to Everfree for the ground to be farmable. A farm near Everfree? Maybe it was something in the air. Maybe the crazy was contagious. Sprung up out of nowhere last spring. No idea who built it. Seems like some ponies went through a lot of effort, then abandoned the place. Or more likely got themselves slaughtered by something wandering out of the forest. Crane shrugged. In the background, I spotted Ditsy-Doo enjoying a muffin. She had one ear cocked, and I suspected she was listening in. We could sorely use some crops, especially now, Crane stated. But local folks have weird rumors about the farm. First pony who tried to move out that way came back a few times, saying it was haunted. And then he stopped coming to town at all. That was a while ago. Could use a pair of eyes scoping the place out, letting us know if it's safe to move into. He wiggled his eyebrows. Assuming you ain't afraid of the headless horse. I mulled it over.
Tell you what, if I'm out that way, I'll poke around, see what I can find, and I'll let you know,
I told him, adding,
for the remedy. But my plate's pretty full right now.
Ditsy-Doo trotted over. She had scribbled a new message on one of the chalkboards hanging around her neck. Don't worry because they say the farm is haunted. No reason to avoid the place. Ghosts don't exist. Just landmines. I blinked.
Landmines?
That's Ditsy-Doo's pet theory, Crane explained. Given the bloody body parts in the places where the ground looked like it had exploded. Meanwhile, Ditsy-Doo was wiping off her chalkboard. A moment later, she offered, Bring me any mines you find, please. I'll trade for caps and grenades. Yep, the crazy was definitely contagious. Silverbell galloped up excitedly.
Come on, Mommy. Zenith has started pinning the tail on the pony. Wanna play?
Wait. Zenith started a game? Then, on second thought, regaining orientation and maintaining accuracy while blinded did sound like an exercise the zebra would be familiar with. I perked my ears, taking a moment to look and listen to the party around me. There was music playing from an old record player similar to the one Amich had, only in far worse condition. The songs were happy and carefree. All the furniture in Railright's living room had been pushed back, and there were ponies dancing with each other. It felt like a touch of the sun's light had been captured and was alive in this room. Firelight was perched on Railright's hat rack. She was bobbing her head, letting out musical whistles as she stared at her colored and disordered reflections in a cluster of balloons. I suspected she'd gotten into the spiked punch. Spike, crap. I still need to tell him about God and Ditsy-Doo.
Excuse me, Crane, I said hastily. I'll be right back.
Yep, take your time, the yellow pony claimed. I got something that needs doing. As I galloped out the door, I passed Gaudina. She was standing outside, listening to the party. I stopped, skidding a bit in the mud.
You okay?
She nodded.
You got a deal. 500 bottle caps, and I'll have those two snug away in the Dragon's Cave by tomorrow evening.
She shook her head. Hope you know what you're doing. Those two. They deserve a good life. I had entertained a fleeting worry that the party had upset her. It would have been easy to be angry over the flash of panic those ponies had caused. How could I have ever doubted you? A little pony in my head asked. It could happen to any of us, another answered. The little pony in my head started looking around for the source of the other voices. I shook my head to clear it of the strange thoughts. No, the truth was that seeing Ditzy-Doo and Silverbell together had touched the gruff Griffin commander, and she'd stepped outside to think. "Thank you," I told her. I started to turn back to where Watcher was waiting, but halted again. "What is your type?" I found myself forced to ask. "Unattached," Gaudina Grimfeathers told me bluntly. The answer brought a smile to my face. From a certain perspective, I supposed that having a mare friend was like a contract. God respected the contract, and she couldn't respect some pony who didn't. "Come on," Silverbell coaxed with big, bright eyes, trying to pull me away from my conversation with Candy. "Come and dance with me." I looked at the adorable little filly, being so earnest and adorable. How could I say no? I glanced up towards her mother, wondering how she managed. The wall-eyed ghoul was watching her daughter lovingly and gave a sympathetic smile. Waving goodbye to Candy, who notably had been responsible for bringing the adult punch, I followed the little lavender unicorn out onto the dance floor. The party went late into the night. Exhausted from dancing, I found an empty table and plopped my tail down next to it, floating over a glass of adult punch. It had a peculiar and deliciously berry flavor, and shed just enough radiation to make my pip buck click. I made the mistake of asking about it. Mutfruit punch tasted better when I didn't know what it was. Zenith joined me. "The little one has fallen asleep," she stated. "We've put her to bed upstairs in the mayor's room. And better than taking her home in the rain. Plus, it kept her and Ditzy-Doo close. The Griffin God is watching her." I wondered if Gilgamesh ever slept. From something I had overheard, I knew I wasn't the only pony in town to ask that. "How are you doing, Zenith?" I asked. "I am not a mother," Zenith said. "I can be a god, a protector, but not more. I envy them." "Maybe you can't be a mother," I said, as I recalled how Zenith stayed to help the zebras of Glyphmark learn the arts of stealth, how she instructed them in making dash. "But you can be more than a guard. You can be a teacher." Zenith didn't know what to say about that. So she drank her mutfruit punch, and I drank mine. At the table nearby, a familiar trio of younger ponies were spending the party discussing what they should name their group. The olive pony was suggesting the Wasteland Rangers. No, we can't do that," the amber mare said. "That would sound like we're trying to copy the Applejacks Rangers. We need something more original." "Hey, I know," the olive-coated buck said, raising a hoof. "How about, Ouroboros?" "The what now?" the amber mare asked, confused. "It's a snake eating its own tail," the buck explained. "Ew. Why would we want to call ourselves that?" No, the buck clarified. "It's an old symbol about renewal, and we're trying to help Equestria renew itself, right?" "You sure about that?" the khaki-coated buck asked. "No," the amber mare insisted, shaking her head. "No snakes of any kind. There's nothing heroic about snakes." I thought she had a point. What kind of group of friends would name themselves after snakes? Leaning over, I offered, "If you want something heroic, how about Crusaders?" I watched the young hero's eyes light up. "I happen to know the name has a pretty illustrious history. Not to mention they seem to come in threes." Oh yeah!" the amber mare exclaimed. "The Wasteland Crusaders." I was smiling as I turned back to my drink, the conversation at the other table having become more excited as the young heroes plotted how they were going to change Equestria. I still didn't know their names, although now I sorta did. Calamity joined me at my table, followed by Reggie, both smiling and chatting. Struck by a suspicion, I asked, "You two have met before, haven't you?" "Yep," Calamity told me, as a pale unicorn mare trotted by, offering cake and muffins. I took a plate of cake and nibbled at it. "Yep," muffin flavored. "Yeah, Calamity here built my guns." Reggie smirked proudly. "Yep. Met her a couple years ago. She and her brother were flying protection for caravans between New Appaloosa and the Republic," Calamity said again. Then assured me with a grin. "Didn't know she was related to your feathered fantasy, though." I moaned, my ears flattening and my cheeks turning red as Reggie didn't hold back her snickering. I was never going to hear the end of this, was I? "You're worse than Velvet." I immediately regretted the reference, seeing the pain it brought. It was contagious. I found myself thinking of Velvet Remedy, and of Steelhooves, and how much I wished they were both here, able to enjoy this party with us. Without them, the party seemed... Reggie yanked our thoughts away from friends no longer with us by pulling out one of her pistols and setting it on the table. I had never seen a design quite like it before. Calamity here took a pair of 223 rifles, cut them down and modified them into the most boss pair of pistols in the equestrian wasteland. I gave an appreciative whistle, wondering how they stacked up against little Macintosh. I'm hoping Calamity here can fix me up with some new quick loaders, Reggie added, pulling out a cigarette only for Calamity to hoof-wave her to put it away. Lost a few when the Enclave attacked Shatterhoof. What happened? I asked, remembering DJ Pony's mention of the attack on the radio. Lame-ass party if you can't even smoke, Reggie grumbled, then shrugged. They attacked. We fought back. We kicked their metal tails to the moon. What's to know? Seeing we weren't satisfied, she sighed. Fine. Apparently some pony high up in the Enclave has got some brains, she admitted. Cottoned on to the idea of sending their soldiers on strikes against raiders first. Set the right first impression. Paint the right picture what the wasteland's all about, and those bucks and mares won't hesitate when they tell them to wipe out a town. Not like previous encampments, the attacking Pegasus had said. There are foals here. Families. Calamity was staring despondently at his cake. Makes sense. Yeah, Reggie claimed. And at the rate they're going to wipe the wasteland clean of raiders by the end of the month. She grimaced. Problem is, nobody told him Shatterhoof wasn't a raider stronghold anymore. Well, problem for them. The young griffin grinned broadly. They didn't send in any of those warbirds, but they sent in a whole flock of troops. At least 3 dozen. And we wrecked them. All that fancy armor and firepower ain't worth shit in the sky if you don't have the experience to back 'em up. I blinked. That was certainly a new take on the threat of the Enclave. But then, the Talons were professional mercenaries, heavily armed and with years of wasteland experience. Reggie pushed herself away from the table. Anyhow, scene's getting stale, and I promised Cage I'd bring him some cake, so I'm bailing. The griffin had walked about 2 yards away from us when she spun around, moved back, and jabbed a sharp talon into our table. Oh, and just so you know, wherever you're going next, Cage and I are going with you. What? No argument. I don't know what you all are up to now, but all of Equestria tends to benefit from your victories. Reggie looked us over, dropping her voice. Mom ain't never gonna admit it, but she's damn thankful for what you did out at Splendid Valley. The goddess? Her plans for griffins weren't exactly pretty. No unity for griffins. Once all the ponies were her children, anything that could challenge them was on the chopping block. Half the reason Red Eye's got so many of our kind working for him, why some of us like Stern are so loyal to him. Zenith was drinking punch from a bowl cup, which clattered to the floor. It's 'cause they knew he's plotting against the goddess. Calamity, Zenith, and I all looked to each other. Reggie continued. Way my bro and I see it, you're the best hope this wasteland's got going for it. And your 2 soldiers down, including your heavy gunner, just as things are getting the most dangerous. You need us. This was surprising, to say the least. And definitely not how Talons operated. Or at least, not how God operated. But we haven't even hired you. The thought was immediately followed by, what's your mom think of all this? Y'all might just change your minds when you hear what we're headed into. Yeah, don't much care, Reggie insisted. We're hiring ourselves to do this. Unless you lot think you can outrun us. We will gladly take all the help we can get, Zenith stated, then looked at me. Am I not right, little one? I looked at Calamity again. Maybe, just maybe, we'd be able to survive his plan after all. In the cold drizzle of dawn, I saw the 4 dozen forms of black carapace armor rise up over the city gates and fly into town. For a moment, I felt panic and rage. The Enclave was attacking again. But that notion faded as soon as I saw the shimmer of caramel-colored magic surrounding the suits of Enclave armor and realized there were no ponies inside. The heavy gate rumbled open, and Crane entered New Appaloosa. He wasn't alone. Walking just behind him was a haggard-looking charcoal unicorn, streaks of scarlet and gold in her white mane. She was wearing Rarity's battle dress and yellow medical boxes for saddlebags. Her. Velvet Remedy halted, eyes widening as she saw me. We stared at each other through the haze of the rain between us, a muddy river of street stretching between us. She flinched back as I broke into a gallop. There was pain between us. But the emotional hurting was eclipsed by the hope I felt seeing her again. She tried to backpedal, but I had her in a hug before she could escape.
You're here? She asked meekly. Of course you're here. Goddesses, we've missed you, Velvet, I told her, not letting her go. Please tell me you're back. I came to help, she said hesitantly. I was visiting Steelhooves and I saw the explosion.
She got here late last night, Crane told me. Been helping with the Pegasi too wounded to fly back home. Of course she was. Velvet Remedy didn't ask if they were the good guys and who were the bad guys. She stopped to help the first hurting pony she came across, and it didn't matter who they were. I hoped her kindness to the enemy left a lasting impression on them. I've been collecting their armor, Crane said, motioning upwards with his horn. Reckon it's a fit gift for Ditzy-Doo. Help repay what the town owes her. I found myself loving Crane just a little bit right then. She's the one who took 'em all down, after all. Sensing an opportunity to change the subject, Velvet Remedy pointed a hoof at Crane.
This one's been claiming he's the best telekinetic in the wasteland, she said indignantly. Obviously he hasn't met you.
Crane and I exchanged looks. He chuckled. I gave him a respectful little bow, which he returned.
Or I was wrong. As usual.
Velvet sighed, watching us.
Crane was my teacher, I explained. He taught me how to unlock my telekinetic potential.
Goddesses, that sounded lame. I blamed it on reading one too many Swordmare's comics. Too much being one. Zenith whispered, where did she come from? Into my ear. You must say, and now the student has become the master. I blinked, still processing Zenith's stealthy appearance. What? Why? It is expected, she whispered earnestly. I shook my mane. By who? The zebra didn't seem to have an answer for me. Crane walked on, floating the several dozen suits of scavenged armor towards absolutely everything. Zenith stepped back, seeming to fade into the weather. Silverbell was right. The zebra was kind of creepy. Velvet Remedy and I were alone in the rain. Velvet? Little Pip? No, you go first. No, go ahead. We stopped trying to talk. The silence stretched awkwardly, scored by the metallic hiss of rain against railway cars. Little Pip, the things I said, Velvet began again. They were so horrible. I took a deep breath. Her words still felt fresh, the pain cutting deep. But you weren't wrong, I told her. And you tried to protect me. You were hurting so much, and you still warned me away, tried to get me to go. I said, realizing it was true. It's my fault. I wouldn't leave. A mayor who keeps poking a hornet's nest deserves to get stung. I wondered briefly if hornets still existed in Equestria. I'd only seen them in books so far. Velvet Remedy shook her head, her striped mane flapping wetly. No, they were cruel. And hypocritical. She shrugged off her medical boxes. The yellow boxes with their pink butterflies sank into the brown water. I'm not worthy to follow Fluttershy. Or to be your friend. I saw she was trembling. Fatigue and cold were certainly part of it. She must have galloped all the way from Fetlock. It wasn't a short journey, not in the least. I put a hoof under her chin, looking into her eyes. It wasn't just rain. She was crying. But I want to, she continued. I let the wasteland poison me. I know that. And I was right. Most ponies don't deserve to be helped. But that's not the reason to do it. I understood. I knew what it was like to have your faith in the goodness of ponies shaken. I felt it back in the pit. All those slaves I was trying to save cheering for my death. But unlike Velvet, that had never been the primary foundation of my urge to help. I know it's up to me. I want to be stronger than the wasteland, not let it poison me anymore. She faltered. But I'm not sure how. Homage was right. The equestrian wasteland is hard on heroes. No, it's brutal to them. It beats them down. It tears them apart. Eventually, every hero falls. Inevitably, every hero fails. The true mark of a hero is not that they never fail, never fall down. No, you know a true hero by what they do after they fall. By the way they pick themselves back up again, shake themselves off, and throw themselves back into the good fight. Velvet, Fluttershy would be proud of you. I started. I was unsure if I was saying the right thing, but it came from my heart. That had to count for something, right? She would want you by your side.
It doesn't matter if you've stumbled. We've all done things we regret. You know I have. No pony's perfect. No pony is strong all the time. Do you think that Applejack never lied? That Rarity was never greedy? Or that Pinkie Pie was never sad? Even Fluttershy had her gardens of Canterlot. I gave her a tender and hopefully uplifting smile. What matters is that you don't let your failures stop you. Velvet Remedy stared at me for a long time, tears streaming down from her eyes. There seemed to be a battle raging inside her. Thank you. I don't deserve friends like you, she said finally. Pulling her head away, she stared at the muddy water concealing her hooves. After a pregnant pause, she let out a trembling whinny. It's my fault that Steelhooves is dead. What? No, Velvet. She looked up. I'm sorry. When you didn't come back, Steelhooves wanted to move. But I knew that clearing was where you would expect us to be. The others thought you were dead, but I refused to believe it. Her voice was slowly rising, touching on hysteria. I insisted that we stay close, believing that if you did survive the balefire bomb, you were fighting to get to us. And we had to be there for you when you finally made it. Trembling, she wailed. I'm the reason it was so easy for the Hellhounds to find us. I made us keep camping so close to the same spot every day. Velvet Remedy broke down, sobbing. I wrapped my hooves around her, holding her tight, understanding her pain, forgiving it, and thanking her for what she had done because of why she had done it. Please tell me you'll come with us again, I whispered finally. We love you. We need you. Being without you is like walking with an open wound. I hugged her tightly. We all miss you so much. Velvet began. She pushed back, breaking out of the hug, and stood there staring at me, only falling raindrops between us. Little Pip. Shawam! A rust and orange streak plowed into Velvet, knocking her out of sight as she was driven into the mud with Calamity on top of her. Velvet! Calamity cheered, nuzzling the exceptionally muddy mare. Good to see you too, Calamity, she said weakly. Calamity stepped back, looking at his mud-covered love. Whoops, he said, blushing. Let me help you up. Before Velvet or I could say anything, Calamity had flown across the street, grabbing a rain barrel from in front of Railright Station. Splash! Calamity dumped the barrel over Velvet Remedy. Velvet sighed. Well, at least I was already wet. And she wasn't muddy anymore. It's good to have you back, Calamity told her, never questioning that she was. Velvet Remedy splashed a hoof timidly. If you'll have me back. Oh, who's being a silly pony now? Calamity chided. Velvet looked up at him. I want to be back. I want to help. Her voice was just shy of pleading. Calamity lowered his muzzle into the muddy water and pulled out her medical boxes, putting them back over her. I watched as she thanked him, and he teasingly threatened to kiss her with his muddy muzzle. It's like things are finally going right again, is it not? Zenith asked, having ninja'd right up beside me. I nodded. The rain was beginning to stop. Suddenly, looking at Velvet Remedy and Calamity, I knew. The very last pieces fell into place. Kindness and loyalty. Was there ever any doubt? The heavy black thunderclouds had shifted to a lighter gray, but were still heavy with rain as the Sky Bandit approached the shattered ruins of Manhattan. Calamity was pulling the passenger wagon. Our two Griffin escorts flanked us. You ever consider mounting a magical energy turret on top of that thing? Reggie called up to Calamity, eyeing the Sky Bandit's rack where Steelhoofs had stood in past battles. Calamity wasn't quick to answer. Like me, I think he felt that mounting a weapon would be too much like replacing Steelhoofs. It was a silly and impractical response, the sort that Calamity had always dismissed in the past, being the first to scavenge stables and the corpses of Steel Rangers. But this was different. This was Steelhoofs. Yep, he finally said. I think Steelhoofs would want it that way. Want us to protect ourselves. He kept flying straight. Just ain't had the time. Cage flew close on the other side, talking to Velvet Remedy. So you follow the pony who all the medical supply boxes are made to look like? Yes, Velvet Remedy stated, beginning to get her hooves back under her. Her name was Fluttershy, and she was the best pony. Cage considered that. But you said she's the one who created the megaspells.
Velvet Remedy had been surprisingly forthcoming with that bit of information. A reaction, I suspected, to our attempts to keep it secret. Which caused the apocalypse, Cage added. So, you're a follower of the apocalypse. Velvet Remedy needed only a heartbeat to answer.
If that is the name ponies wish to use for anyone who aspires to the kindness of Fluttershy, then I will own that title, without reservation.
Suddenly, Calamity dipped low, flying just above the rubble of the city streets. Our griffin shadows took a moment to change direction, swooping in towards us as Calamity brought the Sky Bandit to a rapid halt, pulling us into the cover of a hollowed-out radio print store. "What's wrong?" I asked, leaping out of the passenger wagon as Calamity kicked the quick release on his harness. "Did you not see it, little Pip?" Zenith asked, her exotic voice seeming incredulous. I didn't have to wait long to know what she meant. About 10 minutes later, as we crouched in the cover of a broken sails bench, the pale gray light from the clouds was blotted out by the massive form of a black, anvil-shaped Enclave mobile fortress. 4 great thunderclouds spanned out from it, 2 on each side. The ruined Manhattan street was rendered in stark black and white, as massive bolts of lightning arced between them. Attached to each storm cloud was a raptor. On each raptor, one of the clouds holding it aloft had merged into one of the flying fortress's broiling thunderclouds. The undercarriage of the massive ship bristled with weapon turrets. I could make out several large doors capable of dropping war chariots, or bombers, or troops by the scores.
What the hell?
Couldn't we, just once, get a break? We got a sonic Radboom, the little pony in my head told me. What more do you want? Even Firelight let out a low whistle. "That's the glorious dawn," Calamity said in soft awe as the huge ship passed over the Manhattan ruins. Noticing that we were all staring at him, Calamity coughed. "Thunderhead-class mobile siege platform," he explained.
You said the Enclave only has 4 of those,
I pointed out, hoping I didn't sound accusatory. "Yep, and 2 of them are permanently assigned. One's at Navarro, and the other's in the home of the High Council." I did the math. Both Calamity and Pride had referred to an Enclave regiment as 4 Raptors and accompanying troops, the amount that could be carried and deployed by a Thunderhead. The full regiment had descended on Maripony just before the bomb went off, bringing a member of the High Council with them. Probably the regiment attached to the High Council's own personal Thunderhead. Hundreds of ponies, Commander Winter had said. I felt a little sick. If they're committing Thunderheads to Operation Cauterize, that means they're getting ready for their big offensive, Calamity warned. They've lost too much too quickly. They need big victories fast, or their whole invasion falls apart, and a whole lot of Enclave leaders will be losing their positions in the next election. They can't play around with little targets anymore. Explains why they haven't amassed another assault on New Appaloosa, Cage reckoned. Or Shatterhoof.
Where do you think they are headed?
Zenith asked, as the shadow finally passed, allowing daylight, such as it was, back into the streets.
By the vector, I'd say they're aiming for Philadelphia,
Reddy suggested.
Assuming they don't plan on parking that thing right over top of 10 Pony Tower.
Oh, fuck. Damn it.
Calamity,
I blurted anxiously.
Remember, I told you we can make this all mean something. Make all the loss count. Make this the start of something better.
Calamity stared at me with an expression that told me he was still holding me to that promise. The others just stared.
Well, I've got a plan. I know how to do it,
I began. The Griffins looked anxious and doubtful. Zenith looked reserved, and Velvet Remedy's face bore an expression of concern. But Calamity's eyes lit up with hope, a smile on his face. Then the smile faltered as he tentatively asked, "What about my plan?"
"Your plan comes first,"
I reassured him. My friend looked immediately relieved.
"But this new offensive throws a major wrench in mine. I need to know what the Enclave's timetable is."
Calamity nodded. He clapped his hoof against his forehead, thinking, "Okay, we haven't seen Thunderheads before, so until now they must have been using someplace groundside as a communication center, someplace to correlate data from all the scattered forces and relay commands." I clapped my hoofs together.
"Brilliant. We'll hit the communications outpost and get a hold of their timeline."
"Just what I was thinking." Calamity pondered the matter a moment longer. "It'd have to be someplace pretty high up. I reckon that's what they were using 10 Pony Tower for before they got kicked out. They'd have a fallback position. I remembered how far Blackwing's little broadcaster had been able to reach. The Talons had been trapped in the best possible place for broadcasting.
We've got to get to Horseshoe Tower.
I was sure of it.
You have a plan.
Velvet Remedy leaned out the front window of the Sky Bandit, talking to Calamity.
You.
Calamity nickered as he guided the Sky Bandit in for a landing on the rooftop of Tenpony Tower. I let out a heavy sigh as his hooves touched down.
I keep coming back,
I muttered to myself.
But Homage is never here.
Now don't you say it like that. Calamity shot back at Velvet as he checked his landing and detached himself from the passenger wagon. You make it sound like a doom on a stick.
And your plan is why we're here?
Velvet inquired. Yep. Need your friend Lifebloom's help, Calamity admitted freely. I could see Velvet Remedy cringe as he jumped to the obvious and sadly correct conclusion.
You are doing something with your memories, aren't you?
Calamity didn't even look sheepish as he nodded. Hell, he looked proud of the idea. Yep.
You're not going to forget me, are you?
That struck him. Calamity stumbled a bit. Oh, hell no, he insisted. Lil Pip says that Lifebloom can take memories without, take him away. He looked at me worriedly. That's right, Little Pip. Ain't it?
Yeah, Lifebloom can record memories as well as remove them.
Velvet Remedy looked slightly relieved, but not much.
And collecting your memories is going to help us defeat the fastest, deadliest hunters the Enclave has. How?
Here it comes. The first horseshoe. No. Calamity puffed up, flapping his wings. We ain't gonna defeat the Wonderbolts. We're gonna save 'em. The mottled brown gentle stallion who met us was not either of the unicorns I had been hoping to see, but he was familiar. He had been the one to inform me of the legal details surrounding Monterey Jack's execution, and he was a member of the Twilight Society. A sonic rainboom, he said, as he floated his glasses in front of him, polishing them with a pocket cloth. Or more precisely, a toxic rainboom. I believe that's what the Resistance radio is calling it, is it not?
Resistance radio?
Oh. He raised an eyebrow as he slipped his glasses back onto his muzzle. Yes, that's what the local gentry have taken to calling DJ Pony's little broadcast interruptions. Resistance radio. I liked it. Go Homage.
So the Twilight Society will help us?
I asked, not for the first time. Indeed we will, the gentle stallion lawyer asserted. You and your motley crew have more than proven both your intentions and your capacity for success. We would be honored to lend our hooves to the fight. Wistfully, he added, a sonic rainboom, in my lifetime. Calamity and I exchanged looks. Well, for now, what we need is Lifebloom. His expertise in memory magic, to be precise like. The mottled brown unicorn nodded, not even looking at Calamity. Absolutely. I'll send for him right away. In the meantime, your usual suite is ready.
And, I added, there's something else I need to discuss with you at your earliest convenience. A legal matter.
He turned, looking at me over the rim of his spectacles. Indeed? His earliest convenience turned out to be in less than an hour. I was a bit surprised at the Twilight Society's sudden eagerness to lend their aid. I was probably being paranoid, but when things started working in our favor, it tended to make me nervous. Meanwhile, we gathered in the quarters provided and waited for Lifebloom. Swanky, Reggie whistled, looking over the fine sheets and marble floor tiles. She poked a talon at one of the posh pillows. Cage moved to check out the window, his eyes darting around as he looked out for snipers. No kiddin'. If we had access to this place, I'd find it real hard to go back out into the wasteland and start mixing it up. He drew the curtains closed and nodded to his sister, who had taken up a strategic spot near the door. I don't think we're gonna get attacked here, Calamity suggested. Our Griffin guards looked at each other, as if Calamity was adorably naive.
Sparkling water?
Velvet Remedy offered them, pulling from the complimentary stores in the bathroom. I winced, beginning to feel a little self-conscious. Velvet floated a chalice to each of them, then sipped from one of her own.
Well, hardly sparkling,
she said, looking at it critically.
But it'll do.
This was Tenpony Tower. If Velvet was here, she wanted to be pampered.
If Calamity's going to be a while having his brain molested, Would you like to join me for a trip to the spa, little Pip?
Oh yeah, you ponies really have it hard, don't ya? Cage mocked, rolling his eyes. I pondered that as I stripped out of my armor, heading for a bath. After all the bad, a trip to the spa would be heaven. But right now, I just wanted to feel clean again. I'd forgotten what it felt like. As I dropped my reinforced barding to the floor, Velvet Remedy waved her horn at it, cleaning off the blood and grime. Maybe, if we have time. But I wanted to make use of that time by sneaking into Horseshoe Tower. I had been right about the Enclave's choice. We had spotted the Enclave antenna array on the roof. The raptor circling overhead was kind of obvious, too. I looked over to my companions, new and familiar. A stealth mission. In and out. Yeah, 'cause your stealth missions have a history of working out like that, Calamity snarked. Ignoring him, I continued. I'll take Zenith and one of the Griffins to fly us in there. And, I admitted, to use the cloud systems. I'll go, Cage offered. All this fancy makes my feathers itch. Velvet trotted up to Calamity. So, this plan of yours? Calamity smiled, gazing into her eyes. You want to turn the Wonderbolts, help them see they're on the wrong side? Give them a chance to become heroes? Yep, he said, his muzzle inches from hers. You know, part of me says that's awesome. She gave him a simpering look, leaning so close they had to be feeling each other's breathing. You know, you ain't never been sexier. And that's my cue. I jumped to my hooves, floating my armor next to me. Time to go do the thing in the place. I was out of the door, my armor floating behind me, Cage and Zenith trailing my gallop before they started kissing. I stepped up to the ragged edge, where sometime in the last 200 years, the ceiling 2 floors above had given way, crashing down into the floor beneath, which collapsed, smashing through the floor beneath it. Rings of half-rooms honeycombed the internal abscess. Motes of dust floated lazily into the gaping empty space. It was just as I remembered it. As I looked down into the pit of rubble, the little pony in my head reminded me that somewhere down there was Pinkie Pie's last party, lost forever in an orb. Getting this far had been... Damn. Why was my mind searching for a metaphor for easy that involved muffins? Ditzy-Doo was rubbing off on me, and not in the icky flesh-rotting way. After a moment's internal debate, I went with easy. Zenith had her zebra stealth cloak, and I'd been using my MG stealth buck too. Cage was admittedly not as stealthy, but the two of us had been scouting ahead. When things were clear, Zenith would toss back the hood of her cloak and let him know it was safe to move forward. Despite being an adolescent, Cage never appeared bored. He had the sort of level head to not be looking for a fight. Besides his razor-sharp claws, the Griffin was armed with hellhound claw knives and wing blades. The first Griffin I had seen, the one who helped attack the train, had been armed with those. I'd seen them slice the head off of a pony, but I worried that they would be ineffective against Pegasi and magically powered armor. Multicolored light sprayed across the void, striking parts of the broken ceiling as well as a desk that had been hanging precariously over the drop. The desk melted into goo as it dripped down to the rubble below. Okay, that was new. Diving for cover, I kicked up my eyes forward sparkle. We were in almost the same point that 3 alicorns had stood the last time I was here. And across from us, almost in the same place I had been, an Enclave trooper was firing across at us with a multi-gem heavy infantry battle saddle. I pulled out little Macintosh, locking onto the attacking pony with sats, but had to dive away as the spray of his weapon melted my cover. 2 more Pegasi launched themselves across the gap from another floor. The trooper was laying down suppressive fire while they flanked us. The first Enclave guard came up behind us through an office to our right. Cage moved to block his path, sweeping at the armored pony with his wing blades. The attack proved my fears both valid and unnecessary. The wing blades had sparked harmlessly off the Pegasus's armor, but Cage quickly sent his hellhound claw knives plunging into the pony's throat. Even as the first guard fell, several beams of light struck Cage in the back. His Talon armor took the brunt of it, but one shot speared his right wing. The young Griffin collapsed with a grunt, his eyes closed tight against the tears. The second guard had landed on the floor above us. I heard the clank, clank, clank as she dropped grenades down a fissure in the ceiling. After my time in the wasteland, I'd had plenty of experience in dealing with grenades. Back up they went. Okay, maybe not my brightest idea, I realized, as the explosion not only killed the Pegasus above us, but sent the ceiling crashing down on our heads. My magic imploded as the room above fell on top of me. Something heavy and searingly hot shoved me to the floor. Pain sprouted from my hind legs. I was pinned underneath jagged floorboards and the melted remains of a filing cabinet. Cage had taken cover in the doorway, and I had lost track of Zenith. Fortunately, I was still invisible as the trooper across from us started filling our room with magical energy. The debris was a blade of cover at best. I whipped my head around, desperately looking for where little Macintosh had fallen. The spray of rainbow light stopped as the trooper reloaded. My revolver dropped to the floor next to me, a gift from an invisible zebra. I magically snatched it up and locked my targeting spell onto the Pegasus again. A trio of bullets later, and the Pegasus dropped to the floor. Section 12 clear! A Pegasus barked through my earbloom. Cauterizing in 10 minutes! With the Thunderheads in play, this place had become redundant. The Enclave had already been clearing out when we arrived. The Raptor above hadn't been here for protection. We had 7 minutes before the Raptor opened fire, eradicating Horseshoe Tower. Section 13 clear! Another voice replied. My stealth buck was drained, but we were almost at the end. The last room before the roof was a 2-level executive bar and lounge. That was where they had their equipment set up. The good news was that our infiltration sped up their evacuation. They were no longer trying to pull out their equipment, just their personnel. They would let the Raptor's massive guns take care of all the rest. Section 14 clear, the first voice responded. Cauterizing in 9 minutes. The bad news was the room would be a killing zone. All the soldiers left in the building were either on the roof or inside that lounge. I made sure little Macintosh was loaded with armor-piercing bullets. Calamity had bought up all the ammo for little Macintosh that Ditsy-Doo had, but already I was almost out of armor-piercing rounds again. Part of me hated the Enclave for using magical energy weapons. Their ammo crates never had anything I could use. I nodded to my two companions. Here we go. I telekinetically threw the doors open, my targeting spell locking onto each soldier as I saw them. An Enclave mainframe dominated the room. Cables snaked off of it, crawling into the backsides of cloud interface terminals that sat glowing on surrounding cocktail tables. The room was cold. A row of windows lined the right wall opposite the bar on the left. A couple were still intact, but most had been boarded up. Poorly. Enclave infantry were standing guard, both on this floor and along the balcony above. Gray-clad officers and technician ponies in yellow dresses darted about, rarely landing. Most were headed for the stairs. 2 Enclave soldiers stood ready, just inside the door. They were the first to react. I was faster. Blam, blam. The first went down. Blam, blam. The third shot killed the other door guard, the fourth bullet burying itself into a corpse. 2 shots to the head of each opponent. 2, in case one missed, or just failed to kill. 2 shots and move on to the next. Leave any pony still standing for Cage and Zenith. Whoosh! One of the Enclave infantry on the balcony fired a missile at us. I dove for cover behind the bar. Cage flopped over the bar next to me, half jumping, half propelled by the explosion. Zenith, goopy-hoved, charged across the ceiling. The explosion had blown her hood back, and she was bleeding from small shrapnel wounds. Several Enclave soldiers opened fire, blasting apart the ceiling in a prismatic light show. Ancient crystal chandeliers came crashing to the floor with an almost melodic tinkling. Zenith managed to dodge them all, leaping from the ceiling to the balcony railing. Her forehoofs planted on the railing as she spun, driving bucking hooves into the throat of an infantry pony as he reloaded and tried to aim. I could almost hear his armor crush into his windpipe. The infantry Pegasus pulled his trigger as he collapsed, the missile firing wildly, striking the faded painting of a mare in a sultry position which hung on the far side of the lounge. The explosion blew out what was left of the windows. A damp, early evening wind blew in from outside, clearing the smoke. Blam, blam. Reload. My targeting spell dropped, only for me to bring it back up immediately, squeezing just a little more out of it. Another pony with a multi-gem weapon sent a rainbow of light spraying over the bar and tearing into the liquor bottles rack behind us. Most of the bottles were empty, but the racks behind us hissed and exploded as the magical light passed through several still full ones, boiling the liquid inside. I let out a scream as I was bathed in alcoholic steam. Cage yelped, leaping the bar and trying to charge the attacker before he could reload, his injured wing keeping him from flying. I tried to give him cover, targeting another infantry Pegasus who was aiming for Cage with the twin magical energy rifles in his armor. Blam! Blam! One of those shots missed. The other struck home, but failed to penetrate through to kill the enemy. The Enclave soldier Cage was charging was just a little too fast. She'd finished reloading and opened fire point blank into the Griffin's chest. It didn't save her. Cage's blade slashed deeply through her chest, cutting her heart, even as his talon armor dissolved. The Griffin fell back, smoke rising from a gaping wound in his breast. I stared in horror as the light went out of his eyes. No. Damn it, no! With a loud crack, a black-armored body toppled over the balcony, bucked through the railing by Zenith. I looked up for her, but she was invisible again. Cauterizing in 8 minutes! The Pegasus I had wounded had taken refuge behind the mainframe. I could see his shadow as he downed a healing potion. At the same time, another soldier flew across the room, landing behind one of the columns that supported the balcony along the near wall. A third knocked over a table and hid behind it, shoving it forward through the room, trying to get closer to me. She yelped as the table caught one of the cables and flipped, exposing her. Blam! Blam! The battle raged on. The last Pegasus, a gray stallion with a flowing black mane and tail, held up a hoof in surrender. He was neither a technician nor a soldier. He wore a light gray officer's uniform that went smartly with his coat. The only officer to stay behind, making sure other officers and the technician ponies got out safely while the Enclave troops had tried to kill us. Did kill one of us, I thought heavily. I'd led God's son to his death. I didn't know how I was going to break the news to his sister. I'd never be able to face Gaudina again. But right now, I didn't blame myself. I blamed the Enclave. Give me one reason not to shoot you, I growled. And make it good, because I really want to. Well, yeah, I see it, the Pegasus said, smiling annoyingly. Y'all can kill me, or y'all can win. Evac complete, moving off, the voice in my earbloom claimed. Cauterizing in 5 minutes. What do you mean? I asked, leveling little Macintosh at the Enclave officer's face. I had my targeting spell locked on for good measure. Sir, we've still got one officer inside, another Pegasus said over the military channel. Cauterizing in 5 minutes, was the cold response. Well, I reckon y'all didn't come up all this way just 'cause you like being shot at, the officer reasoned. I'm guessing what you came for is on that mainframe, but right now, you only got about 4 minutes left to get your tails out of this building, and you're down the only person who could access it. Fuck. Celestia's fiery hemorrhoids of solar flaring death. Cage died for nothing. So I'll make y'all a deal, the officer said. Y'all let me go, and I'll download what you need into that pip what the fuck you got there. And why would you betray the Enclave? Zenith asked. Why would you help us? Well, 2 reasons, the Pegasus said, still smiling but with an earnest tone in his voice. 1, 'cause y'all folks are Calamity's friends, and I love my little brother, and I ain't happy to see his name on a kill list. 2, 'cause I reckon without any flyers with you, chances are 3 minutes won't be enough for you to get out anyway. I would have stopped to think about that, to process what he said, but the voice in my earbloom announced, Cauterizing in 4 minutes. Okay, I agreed, motioning for the Pegasus to get to work. I chose to believe him, not because of what he said about Calamity, but because he hadn't lied about how much time we had. You're wind shear, right? I asked as the stallion moved to the nearest terminal. Calamity had said his oldest brother was a master of communications technologies. You were the chief communications officer here, weren't you? I guessed. Yep to both, he said, and he worked. I caught the password. Restricted. Now what exactly do y'all want? 'Cause I could give you everything, but that'd take a lot longer than what you got. I need to know what the Enclave is doing next, and when. I answered, the gears in my head spinning. What's the chance that 2 of Calamity's brothers would be down here? I pondered aloud as he started to download. Cauterizing in 3 minutes. We were cutting it insanely close. Well, I'd say about 100%, Windshear said with a smile, backing away from the terminal. They put Autumn Leaf in charge of Cauterize,
and he made sure both of his brothers were part of the show. The Grey Pegasus chuckled. Hell, that was the only way Pride was ever going to see anything outside of Navarro. I grinned, hanging my head in pain. One of Calamity's brothers was commanding this entire damned massacre. I'll be going now, Windshear said. But y'all pass my love on to Calamity, won't you? Your love? Zenith asked. Did you not all treat him horribly? Windshear shrugged. We were kids. Zenith stomped. Not an excuse. Look, Pride did it because he was a bastard. And worse, an incompetent bastard. Unlike Calamity, he was nothing but a disappointment to Dad. He did it because Autumn Leaf did it. And he hoped copying Autumn Leaf would make him get some respect. Windshear added. It didn't. The voice of my earbloom spoke again. Cauterizing in 2 minutes. As for Autumn Leaf and myself, we remember what Dad was like before Mom died, he said only half apologetically. He was better before that. Not always the drill sergeant. We'd lost our mom, we'd lost the best part of our dad. We were hurting, and Calamity was right there. Windshear shrugged again, then flew off towards one of the open windows. The download completed. I turned to Zenith, wrapping her with my magic, then myself. I galloped for the window. Cauterizing in 1 minute, my earbloom informed me as I leapt out the shattered window into the cold open air. The raptor had backed off far enough that I doubted they could see us. The barrels of their huge magical energy cannons were glowing like miniature suns as they charged up to fire. The sky split, the air tearing apart as multiple beams of orange-white plasma tore into Horseshoe Tower. Every remaining window tore apart, shards of glass followed by gouts of flame. I turned away from the sight, focusing completely on moving us away from the doomed skyscraper. Sweat was already pouring down my forehead. I was going to see just how far I could fly after all. When we arrived back at Tempony Tower, it was by way of the Celestia line, and Zenith was carrying me on her back. I was feeling rather proud of myself. I'd gotten us a little over a mile before strain and exhaustion forced me to put us down in one of the 4-star stations. Proud and oh so very, very tired. I was ready to take Velvet Remedy up on that trip to the spa now. Only, it was very late, and the spa would be closed. Not to mention I had to face Regina Grimfeather still. I pored over the data Windshear had given us. The stallion had been true to his word. We got what I had asked for, and no more. The Enclave was focusing now on what it considered the 2 biggest threats. First and foremost was Red Eye. They had tracked him to the cathedral. They had a regiment patrolling the borders of the Everfree Forest, trying to make sure he didn't escape. In 2 days' time, the Overcast, Colonel Autumn Leaf's command thunderhead, was going to move in with a second full regiment and wipe the cathedral off the face of Equestria. The Glorious Dawn was being dispatched to a rendezvous with the bulk of the Enclave's forces, amassing for an attack on Philadelphia. And by attack, they meant cleansing. Slavers, slaves, rangers, scavengers. They were going to kill them all, and reduce the factories that Red Eye had rebuilt to rubble for good measure. And they could. I'd just seen them turn Horseshoe Tower into a mound of rubble and slag. I couldn't let that happen. My blood ran cold as I saw the Enclave's second target. Homage. Somehow, my mare friend had rated as the second biggest threat to the Enclave. Attached to that assessment was a video file. I was trembling as I pulled it open, but I didn't know if it was from fear or rage. The video was the security camera from a raptor. I watched as Homage brought down the shattered hoof bridge tower. The explosion from the Star Blaster had disintegrated everything it touched. It had eaten the tower's base. They didn't know she could only do that once. They only knew that she did it. And that made her even more terrifying than Ditzy-Do. Almost as much of a threat as Red Eye and all of his armies. I realized that, strangely, I wasn't frightened or mad anymore. I was proud. Proud of my wonderful, dangerous Homage. And they had no idea what to do about it. Sending more forces after her risked, in their minds, further retaliation. And that could mean the destruction of another tower, maybe more. So instead, they were sitting on their hooves. Well, not exactly. They had given lethal sanction to the one group they thought could actually hunt down and kill Homage without her being able to strike back. The Wonderbolts. Calamity was right. The Wonderbolts had been drawn into meetings.
but those were due to end in about 6 hours. After that, our hunters had been given 32 hours to complete their current assignment. Then, they were ordered to refocus their efforts on murdering my mare friend. 32 hours. I prayed they would do what I so desperately wanted to. Sleep. After 20 hours of meetings, what pony wouldn't want to catch some sleep, making sure they were fresh and revived before they were hunting down other ponies and killing them? Zenith nudged open the door to our suite and deposited me on the floor with an undignified thump. I yelped as I landed on my scalded backside. Calamity trotted over, looking down at me. "So, how'd it go?" I was surprised that he was still in the room. Or was it back in the room? Lifebloom walked up next to him as Velvet Remedy gave the gasp we were all expecting and dashed to tend to our wounds, staring at the bloody zebra. "Windshear sends his love," I answered. I winced as a female voice called out from the corner. "Where's Cage?" Regina Grimfeather stared down at her twin brother's knives, then carefully slid them into her belt. "Thanks for bringing these back." "Regina, I'm so sorry." "There is no body," Zenith informed her. "The Enclave." "Shut it! About the bloody Enclave!" the Griffin roared. The room was shocked into silence. Calamity finally broke that silence. "So what now?" Regina Grimfeather scowled at him. "What do you mean, what now?" she asked gruffly. "The job ain't over yet, is it?" "You're staying?" Velvet gaped. "Grimfeathers don't turn tail and run when it gets nasty," she spat. The young Griffin woman laid down. Her eyes were moist, but she had yet to shed a tear. Almost under her breath, she added, "And I sure as hell ain't going back to tell God I quit the job that killed Cage." Velvet floated a healing potion to me as she magically stripped off my armor and began inspecting me for wounds. It was like she had never left. "So," Reggie said finally, "what now?" Lifebloom spoke up. "Now I gathered together what I need for that trip." "Say, what now?" The unicorn with the red and scarlet mane looked at us. Storing a copy of so many of Calamity's memories was actually the easy part, but the other requests... He turned to Calamity. "I'm sorry, but the Twilight Society simply does not have 5 recollectors to give you." I'd been afraid of that. Calamity's plan had been to divide the Wonderbolts, incapacitate them through Zenith's paralyzing hoof and Velvet's anesthetic spell, and then slap recollectors on them, feeding them his memories. Memories of how and why he had left the Enclave. Memories of the good ponies down here. Of his time with me, and the good things we had done. And to trust in the better nature of ponies. The problem was, it takes as long to experience the memories in the Black Opal as it took for the person to live them. And Calamity wanted to feed several days' worth of memories into the Wonderbolts. Keeping them safe and hydrated was a big enough concern, but if we didn't have enough recollectors to trap them all at the same time... "Fortunately, I have a better way," Lifebloom claimed. "There's a memory spell, one created by Twilight Sparkle herself, which should allow me to cram all those memories into their heads in minutes. It won't be pleasant." The white unicorn shook his head. "But it should work." No offense, but have you ever been outside Ten Pony Tower before?" Calamity asked. "It's kinda rough out there." Lifebloom tossed his mane. "Yes, I'm a little familiar with the outdoors." This was a much bigger commitment for the Twilight Society than just some recollectors. "Are you sure? The last person who went on a mission with me didn't make it back." Regina shot a dark glower at no pony in particular. "You called on us to help. And you're right." Lifebloom gazed at me. "This is us helping." Reggie stood up. "'Kay then, what are we waiting for? Let's get moving." "Well," Velvet Remedy said softly, "some of us need sleep." She did her best not to glance my way. I hadn't moved from where Zenith had dropped me on the floor. "Not long, though," I insisted, still not moving. Floor was good. Just give me a pillow. "We need to be moving before the Wonderbolts are." Reggie looked at the ponies, and Zebra, around her. Firelight gave a tired little hoot, even though she had spent most of the trip napping against Velvet Remedy's flank. "Fine," she groused. My eyelids were getting heavy, but I forced them to stay open. There was one more horseshoe hanging above us, waiting to drop. So, Lifebloom asked, just where are we headed? Well, we'll need a place where the Wonderbolts won't be able to totally own us with their aerial superiority, Reggie pointed out. Velvet flicked back her styled mane. She'd obviously been to the spa while I was out. She looked perfect.
Well, Manhattan had to have more stables than just number 29. Do you know if any are just lying around vacantly?
No stables, Calamity interjected. Those things are death traps, in case y'all ain't noticed. And even if the stable ain't trying to kill us itself, all the Wonderbolts would have to do is close the door and collapse the tunnel. Or do what Little Pip did to Stable 24, and divert a river to it. Velvet Remedy cringed, looking at me in surprise.
They don't even need a river,
Reggie added.
These are Pegasi. They're really good at making it rain.
She shook her head, looking at my Pegasus friend. Best roll out underground entirely. And here it drops, I thought. So, we need someplace that the Wonderbolts can't use their aerial skills against us, Lifebloom said slowly. And where we can get them split up. But that's outside. Yep, Calamity said with conviction. And I got the perfect place, too. Look at it fall. Everfree Forest. The first golden rays of dawn were pouring across the horizon as the Sky Bandit leveled out, flying towards Hope.
Remind me again why you let Calamity make the plans this time,
Zenith said. She had taken off her stealth cloak and given it to Lifebloom. The buck would definitely have more need of it than her, and we couldn't risk the Wonderbolts taking out the one pony who could cast the memory spell, or risk the forest taking him out, or the fire, or any of Red Eye's troops who were controlling the fires, or the Enclave patrols. The consensus was that we were, indeed, all going to die, but at least it would be an exciting death.
Well, I'm proud of him,
Velvet proclaimed.
If we are going to the Everfree Forest,
Zenith said, pulling an ancient and tattered book from her saddlebags,
then there is something I must tell you.
I looked at the book. The cover was very old leather, warped and cracked. On the front was a large zebra glyph, with several smaller ones beneath. The last time I had seen glyphs like that, I was trying to read the black book.
Where did you get this?
I asked, both cautious and curious.
It is from Zephyr,
our zebra friend said.
Once, this belonged to my grandparents. They rescued it from the hut of Zecora, deep in the Everfree Forest.
Zenith opened the book, pointing at strange glyphs.
You wonder what caused the Everfree Forest to grow so strange and dangerous, do you not?
I nodded, remembering Calamity's assertion. The Everfree Forest had never been hit. There was no radiation, no taint. That's why Red Eye sought to turn it into farmland.
Through this book, I have come to learn the reason,
Zenith said cryptically.
And it is not a new one, but a very old one.
And you're just telling us this now?
I received this book while you were playing in the Canterlot ruins, and it took me some time to read it.
Time, I suspected, that babysitting Silverbell had given her.
And it was not easy to read. There were things I do not wish to understand.
We all listened intently. Even Calamity's ears were swiveled so he could catch the conversation as best he could. Something flashed in the distance. On the horizon was the Everfree Forest. Still green, still pouring smoke.
I believe we may have been wrong about Princess Luna and Nightmare Moon,
Zenith admitted, looking down at the book. The zebra was unwilling to meet the gaze of any of the ponies around her.
They were not one and the same.
Velvet cocked her head quizzically. Firelight let out a questioning coo.
Before the war, long before the wasteland, over 1,000 years ago, a star fell to our world, and it fell in the Everfree Forest, close to where the princess lived.
I knew this story. It had been told to me by Midnight Shower.
The fallen star's influence warped and twisted everything around it,
Zenith claimed.
According to Zecora's writings, even a little exposure was enough to help Luna's inner darkness take hold and manifest. Only the powers of the elements of harmony were fully able to nullify what it had done to her.
The zebra finally looked up.
Forgive me for speaking what may seem ill of your goddess, but Celestia was never as strong as her sister. When things hurt too much, she would run away.
I glared at Zenith. This had to be going somewhere. I wasn't happy with this sudden and unflattering analysis of Goddess Celestia.
She stepped down from the throne in the middle of the war,
Zenith reminded us.
And this was not the first time Celestia abandoned something. When forced to banish her little sister to the moon, she fled their castle, leaving their home behind to rot in the Everfree Forest.
Okay, I could see that. And really, who could blame her? The memories that castle must have held. It would probably be too painful for any pony to feel.
And she left the elements of harmony behind in the castle,
Zenith said.
Just laying there.
Zenith stared down at the book, seeming to read from the glyphs.
The elements of harmony, the most powerful of all known magics, were left on their pedestals, save for one, which was hidden, waiting for a spark to reveal it. And in all the centuries that passed, the castle crumbled and fell. Moss and vines grew up around the pedestal of the elements, and they were forgotten, faded into legends and old mares' tales.
What in tarnation does all that have to do with the Everfree Forest being all crazy? Calamity called back impatiently. Place didn't get so bad till after the war. Zenith shook her head.
No, Winged One. It was getting bad before then. The badness just took time to grow. And what caused the badness to grow?
Velvet Remedy asked.
What caused it to get so much worse, if not the war?
It sounded like she was buying this. To me, it was all insane zebra logic.
From reading this book, Zenith said, I have come to believe that the infection of the stars was being held at bay for thousands of years. Even during that time, the forest was bad, but it was not as bad as it could have been because something in the heart of the forest was hindering it. The elements of harmony, even abandoned and dormant, were holding back the bad. And then they were removed.
Again, my eyes caught something glinting in the early rays of dawn. It was ahead of us, out near the Everfree Forest.
What is that?
That, Calamity repeated. You mean the glow? I nodded. Then, realizing he couldn't see me, called out a yes. That day is the Hope Solar Array. Only time of day when those dishes pick up enough sunlight to shine is the crack of dawn. He chuckled. We'll be passing right over it before we head into Everfree, so y'all can get a good look. I nodded again, this time to myself. I was thinking about something Calamity had said about the Enclave.
Okay, everyone, listen up. We're planning to try to separate the Wonderbolts, but there's a good chance we could get ourselves split up. We need a fallback position.
You thinking about the array? Calamity asked. It's close, but still quite a few miles from the forest edge. Long way to go out in the open, especially if you're wounded. Drat. Think. Okay, backup idea.
Okay, I've got it. There's a farm right at the edge of the Everfree Forest. It's supposedly got landmines or ghosts or something, so be careful.
Possibly a bad idea. But at least it was a landmark.
Go near, but not in.
It was either that or Fluttershy's cottage, and I really didn't want to take Velvet Remedy back there. The others quickly agreed. We continued to fly, making small talk as the Everfree Forest drew ominously closer. I had stopped staring out of the window. I didn't really want to see the distance between us and the forest being eaten away. Looking in my companion's eyes, I could see everyone was feeling the same thing I was. A sense of wrongness and inexplicable dread. Like our skin was too tight. I had started feeling it the minute I had started to smell the smoke. This was a bad plan. But the Wonderbolts were on the clock now. They had to come get us, and my pip leg was drawing them right to me. With any luck, we shouldn't have to camp out in the forest for more than a few hours. I watched Lifebloom. He looked out of place amongst us. Yet our whole plan rested on his memory spell. Something clicked in my head. I smacked my forehead with a hoof.
Let me guess,
I said, catching the white unicorn's attention.
You watched my memory orbs first. Then memory spelled them into the other ponies in the Twilight Society, didn't you?
And here I'd been so smug, thinking I would be able to keep them effectively incapacitated for days. Lifebloom gave me a pompous smile. Oh, absolutely. Then he frowned. Except for the last one. Memory Orb 8. I was quite convinced that it held nothing any of them would want to see. I started to thank him, but he added, and I swiftly gouged it from my own memory to mitigate the trauma. Velvet Remedy snickered. I didn't know whether to be relieved or offended. Oh, and why's that? Reggie asked, perking up and flying closer. It was the first thing she'd said all morning. Yay for it being about my sex life. It's none of your business, Life Bloom replied sharply. The unicorn buck moved across the passenger wagon and sat next to me. In a soft whisper, he confessed, I meant no offense. Homage and I have been friends for a long time, and that's not the way I want to think of her. Attention passengers, Calamity called back. If y'all look out your windows, you can see the Hope solar array on your right, and if you look out in front, you can get a real good look into the Everfree forests. We'll be descending to 20 yards above tree level for the next part of our trip. I jumped up, shifting to the window. Below and to the right, half a dozen concrete towers rose out of the ground, 5 of them topped by giant bowls tiled inside with battered and weathered mirrors. A strange fixture rose up from the center of each disc, making them seem like little flowers, and the array like a giant artificial garden. One of the dishes had broken off of its tower and toppled face down to the ground next to it. A large crack was running up from where it first struck the ground. I floated out my binoculars for a closer look. A wasteland merchant had set up shop beneath the overturned dish. I suggest covering your muzzles. Air quality is likely to go downhill pretty dang quick. The air grew thick, acrid and hazy. Velvet Remedy passed me a scarf to wrap around my muzzle for protection. She had been thoughtful enough to purchase one for every pony, though the one she gave Zenith was striped with red and gold and simply looked ridiculous. We almost made it to the tree line when we heard the cracks of thunder behind us. Turning around, I saw 5 columns of black smoke, crackling with lightning, shooting out from the Hope solar array. The Wonderbolts. Calamity yelled and began to flap his wings as hard as he could, pouring on the speed. I enveloped the Sky Bandit in my magic, lightening his load as much as possible. They are bad hunters, Zenith complained. They have no stealth. It's as if they want to be seen. They do, Reggie called, catching back up. If they wanted, they could attack us any moment we flew over that place. Or before. Oh, great, so they're enjoying the chase, I said dourly. Or they're driving us into the Everfree forest on purpose, Reggie called back. The haunted farm with all of its exploded bits of dirt was passing below us now. Only, they didn't look like the disruptions caused by detonated landmines to me. They looked like the work of hellhounds. I ran to the back window, staring down as the farm we passed over flashed by. In the yard, partially hidden under a tarp, was an Enclave antenna array. It looked just like the one on the rooftop in Old Olney. Ah, fuck. I looked back up. The streaks of electrified black smoke had taken a sharp turn, and were headed straight for us, catching up fast. Trees rushed beneath them, obscuring the farm. We were over the forest now. Heat rippled up to us, the world becoming an oven. We were in the Everfree. That unnatural sense of dread from earlier grew, like bugs walking along my bones. The miles between us and the Wonderbolts closed rapidly, as more of the forest shot past beneath us. I could see the orange of flames burning across the ground between the trees and along the shores of a river turned gray with ash. What the hell? Something was seriously wrong with this picture. Calamity gave a shout as the cliffside suddenly rose up in front of us. He turned sharply upward, the passenger wagon tilting steeply. We tumbled towards the back, falling towards the glassless back window and the forest below. Zenith splayed out, catching the edges of the rear window as Life Bloom and I toppled against her. The jolt of panic caused my magic to explode. The sudden weight almost pulled Calamity out of the sky. Blam! One of the Wonderbolts fired a shot. A single shot from what sounded like an anti-machine rifle. A hole opened up in the roof of the Sky Bandit, a matching one in the floor. I heard a strange pop, and Calamity heard it too. With a scream of panic, Calamity pulled us off the edge of the cliff, grassy ground appearing closely beneath us, before kicking the quick release on his harness with a shout of, "Abandoned wagon!" Zenith pulled her legs in, and dropped out the back window, followed by Life Bloom and myself. Firelight shot out the side window as Velvet Remedy hurled herself out the door. Zenith hit the grass rolling, I slammed into the forest floor with a graceless thud, small rocks and stiff plants lashing abrasions across my legs and under my chin as I skidded to a halt. If we hadn't been going mostly upward, Velvet Remedy hadn't even hit the ground when the Sky Bandit exploded in a pyrotechnic eruption of wild magic. I stumbled to my hooves, looking around for my friends. My mouth tasted like wet copper. My legs spasmed. I had bruises all along my stomach and left side, making it hard to breathe. The world canted, throwing me off balance. I fell back to the ground again. Scattered around us were burning hunks of twisted metal, the remains of the Sky Bandit. Seeing them drove a pang through my heart, like we had lost a dear pet or treasured heirloom. Zenith had landed nearby. She had lost her scarf, but looked otherwise none the worse for having fallen out of a passenger wagon just before the flying bomb lived up to its moniker. The zebra was on her hooves, and looking much more steady than I thought I would ever be again. Zenith strode over and helped pull me back to my hooves. A moment later, Calamity swooped overhead. "Where are the others at?" I called to him. "Clearing just ahead," he shouted down to me before zipping ahead. I stumbled forward, my legs threatening to give out. My side protested with every step. Just my luck that we had 2 healers with us now. But at the same time, neither were with me. I just couldn't win, could I? Zenith helped guide me forward, pushing through the foliage. The heat was oppressive. The smoke choked my lungs. But the fire hadn't made it to this height yet. I was again struck by the sense that something was seriously amiss. I paused, looking around and trying to put hoof on what I was feeling. Nothing. "Ow!" I whined, as a leafy branch Zenith pushed aside came snapping back across my face. Pushing through the last of the underbrush, I ran into Velvet Remedy's backside. The impact sent me falling onto my flanks, then all the way down as my forelegs gave out. I stared in front of me, between Velvet Remedy's hooves. A fiercely determined bunny rabbit stared back at me. The bunny was made of stone. Beyond the stone bunny, the grassy knoll rose up to where a massive weeping willow, twisted and ancient, rose above us. The rough bark of the tree was a strange buttery yellow. Blue vines wrapped around its gnarled roots. Its drooping pink leaves swayed in the wind I couldn't feel. The tree was framed by the angry brown sky, choked with smoke. Beyond the tree, the hillside dropped back downward into the fires of the ever-free forest, those flames pushed forward by the dark silhouettes of Red-Eye's griffins, their weapons pouring liquid fire across the ground.
Footnote. Maximum level.